There's memes going around on Twitter and other social media of a picture of Putin, Assad, and Yanukovych, the former president of Ukraine, who was ousted, all sitting in some meager Russian apartment as exiles, and of course that kind of image doesn't make Putin feel very good at all.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today I've had Sir Bill Browder on the program. We've spoken about Donald Trump's decision to leave the G7 summit early before he had a chance to have his third in-person meeting with President Zelensky. The fact that before he left, he kept saying that Russia shouldn't have been taken out of the G8 in 2014 under the Obama administration. We also speak about what's happening between Israel and Iran and how this affects Ukraine, how it kind of delays getting a peace deal over the line. We also speak about the fact that Donald Trump is using these words condemning Iran, but isn't doing that for Putin. So all that today on the Trump Report. You can watch us every day, Monday through Friday, on Times Radio's YouTube, or if you don't have time to watch YouTube, you can stream us now as a podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. So Bill Browder, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Great to be here.
I want to start off with what happened early this week. We, of course, had the G7 summit in Canada, but Donald Trump, he left a day early, which caused a bit of controversy. He left before these allies could really just start to talk about what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, start these really important conversations. But not only did he leave before that, he made comments about how Russia should never have been taken out of what was then the G8 after Russia was taken out under the Obama administration when they started to annex Crimea, which was obviously the start of the war. He said that the invasion of Ukraine never would have happened had Russia been able to stay in what was then, of course, the G8. So what's your response to the fact that Donald Trump not only left early before these important conversations, but basically said the war wouldn't have happened had this not happened?
It's kind of hard to even respond to that because it's just so idiotic. First of all, the idea of showing up at an international gathering right now and suggesting that Russia shouldn't have been kicked out of the G8 when Russia is involved in a full-scale murderous invasion of their neighboring country, Ukraine, just defies belief. For him to say that just makes no sense. And then, of course, for him to then blame the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine on the fact that they were kicked out of the G8 because they had invaded Ukraine before. So there's two invasions. There was one in 2014 when Russia illegally annexed Crimea and then went into eastern Ukraine. And then there was the, quote, full-scale invasion in 2022. The idea of kicking Russia out of the G8 was in response to their first invasion. So to then say, well, they wouldn't have done their second invasion if we had left them in is just absurd, childish, ridiculous.
And not only that is, of course, that Trump, he left early. He said it was because of what was happening in Iran and Israel, which was obviously Mark Carney tried to have his back and say that he was leaving to broker a ceasefire. And Trump said that that wasn't happening. But now, of course, they're saying he was leaving because of Iran and Israel. But what was quite, I guess, sad is the word I want to use, is that you see President Zelensky fly into Canada the day, only a few hours after Donald Trump leaves, because he's getting ready for their third in-person meeting together. And of course, Zelensky doesn't get that opportunity, but he does leave Canada with some more aid from Mark Carney's government. But he leaves without this crucial meeting with the United States, Bill. So what do you think that says about the fact, about the United States' commitment to helping Ukraine? Should Trump have stayed and had this meeting with President Zelensky?
Well, Trump has made it very clear that he sides with Vladimir Putin, that he thinks of President Zelensky as sort of an annoyance, that he'd like, it irritates him that Zelensky is not surrendering to Putin so that this whole thing could be over. and he could show up and collect his Nobel Peace Prize. And the idea that America is going to support Ukraine, I think we should all come to terms with the situation, which is that Trump is not interested in supporting Ukraine. He's made it clear. Pete Hegseth has made it clear. Marco Rubio has made it clear that the U.S. is not going to supply any more military aid to Ukraine. The U.S. is not going to do anything more than whatever was agreed before by Congress, and even some of that they're not doing. And the U.S. Military aid will run out by the end of the year, and I don't think there'll be any new military aid packages approved by Congress, and I don't think that Trump is going to do anything more for Ukraine. I think that everybody, the Ukrainians, the Europeans, everybody is, sort of desperately hanging on by by their nails, hoping that Trump is not going to abandon Ukraine. But I think it's pretty clear that he is, and I think that we should adjust ourselves to that reality and do whatever we need to do to make sure that Ukraine doesn't lose this war, whether America is in or out.
How do you think this escalated conflict between Israel and Iran will hurt Ukraine, Bill?
I think it's going to hurt Ukraine very profoundly in the same way as the Hamas invasion of Israel on October 7th. The headlines are now every minute of every day all about the war between Israel and Iran. And as such, Putin is able to dramatically increase his attack on civilians in Ukraine, and it's not getting anybody's attention. And so this is really a big win for Putin to have everybody's attention totally diverted, and it will be diverted for some time. And during that time it's diverted, he can commit atrocities and demoralize the Ukrainian people and kill Ukrainian people without any real backlash because the world has got its mind elsewhere.
Trump posted this on Truth Social about Ali Khamenei, Bill. He said that we know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He's an easy target, but he is safe there. We are not going to take him out, kill him, at least not for now, but we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Our patience is wearing thin. Thank you for this attention at this time. Now, when we see Donald Trump using language like that, so much so, practically saying America is willing to assassinate the supreme leader of Iran. And then we see these reports that the American military is potentially going to drop a bomb on Iran. How do you think that feels to Zelensky or to anyone who's been barracking for Ukraine, that in just a few days, I think we're in the 5th day of fighting with Israel and Iran, Donald Trump not only is saying that the US military are keeping tabs on the supreme leader's whereabouts to potentially take him out, but they're also willing to drop a bomb on Iran.
Well, remember, this was the president that said, no wars started during my presidency. I'm the no war president. And we're not more than a few months into his second presidency, and he's basically talking about starting a war. I'm absolutely no friend of Iran. I think that they're an evil empire in the same way as Russia is evil, and they're all evil together. But if on one hand he's saying the war should end between Russia and Ukraine by Ukraine surrendering because I don't want any wars when I'm president, and then in the other side of his mouth he's talking about dropping a bomb on Iran and assassinating the president. It kind of ruins that whole narrative that he's the no-war president.
I know, but Bill, do you see a world in which the United States follows Israel into a war in Iran? Because, of course, we've seen these threats from Iran that they will target US, potentially UK and French military bases in the area, and the situation would escalate significantly if that were to happen. But yeah, what would happen? Donald Trump, he sends troops in and they enter another war. That's exactly, as you said, the polar opposite of what he said his presidency would be for.
Well, it's very interesting to see the discord within the MAGA movement in Washington. So Tulsi Gabbard, who is his director of national intelligence, who has been very sympathetic to all sorts of dictators, including Putin in the past, made a very firm statement at the beginning of her tenure as the head of the DNI, saying that Iran wasn't developing a nuclear weapon. And then all of a sudden Trump said, well, he thinks they are, and he doesn't care what she said. And then we also have him fighting with Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, who doesn't like what's going on, and Trump says he should get a job with a real network. And so, there's all sorts of stuff going on. I mean, it really is chaos in Washington because there are so many different strands of the MAGA movement and of Trump's support, and some of them, this is now the neocon strand. I mean, the neocons wanted to, bomb Iran from the very beginning, and so Trump has now stepped out of one strand and into another strand in this whole story.
I know. You do wonder how military families are feeling right now, because when earlier in the year, a lot of conservative Americans, I think it was Rand Paul, Jim Jordan, a few of them came out and said, no boots on the ground anywhere. We're not sending US troops anywhere, especially when Donald Trump made those Riviera of the Middle East comments that would probably require US troops to help facilitate that ethnic cleansing and, of course, the rebuild of the Gaza Strip. But it was interesting to see so many staunch supporters of Donald Trump come out and say, absolutely not. We don't want to enter another war. So, yeah, he's definitely going against his MAGA base here. So it will be interesting to see how they swing when this keeps developing. But, Bill, in terms of Vladimir Putin's role in this situation, what you would call Russia and Iran would probably be situational friends, strategic partners, not necessarily military allies. But it seems right now that Russia is basically watching on as this conflict unfolds. Putin is in a rare position where he's had phone calls with Donald Trump, Iran's president, and Israel's president as well, and yet he's really hasn't done much in terms of interfering.
Well, so this whole Iran situation, as far as Russia is concerned, it's got some big benefits to Putin and, of course, a very big cost. So the benefits to Putin are first, that he doesn't look like such a bad guy if he can then propose to be an intermediator or some kind of interlocutor between Trump and Iran. All of a sudden, he's no longer the bad guy. He's some kind of neutral mediator, which gives him some power and some leverage in his own situation. The second is, of course, that his only lifeline economically is oil. To the extent that Iran is at war, it puts Iranian oil supplies at risk, pushes up the price of oil, and Putin then benefits financially from that. And I should point out that it really is a savior for Putin, because Trump's previous Liberation Day tariffs had created so much economic turmoil that the oil price had dropped, and so now oil prices are back up to where they were before, and I'm sure Putin is very happy about that. Now, on the other hand, it's very bad for Putin, because Putin is in the world that dictators and autocrats should be the winners, and all of a sudden, part of his dictator and autocrat club, of which he and China and the Iranians and so on, all of a sudden one of their members is being annihilated, humiliated. And of course, Trump's comments about finding the supreme leader in his bunker and killing him, that can't make Putin feel very good if under some strange scenario they were to fall out, which they are nowhere near doing at the moment. But if they were, Putin can't feel too good about that. And so, Putin is living in a very dangerous world. Some things are helping him, some things are hurting him. He doesn't have any control over any of it, and so he's just got to figure out how to make the most of whatever's happening.
I mean, Bill, in the off chance that Ali Khamenei is assassinated, whether it's by US troops or not, do you think that would make Putin threatened for his life?
Well, I think that Putin is terrified of any dictator being killed. I think it really upset him when Gaddafi was killed and Saddam Hussein was hung. I think he probably watches videos of Ceausescu being hung. This is his worst fear, that somehow the end of his power is going to be the end of his life. That's what he thinks is going to happen, which is why he's so desperately trying to stay in power. So, I mean, there's memes going around on Twitter and other social media of a picture of Putin, Assad, and Yanukovych, the former president of Ukraine, who was ousted, all sitting in some meager Russian apartment as exiles, and of course that kind of image doesn't make Putin feel very good at all.
No, he probably thinks he's absolutely next in this, I guess, war on these dictators. But Bill, you mentioned this mediating role from Vladimir Putin. Trump says he's not going to reach out to Iran. He says they know where to find me in order to broker not just a peace deal, but of course reignite this nuclear deal, which would of course end Iran's nuclear capabilities, their nuclear program. But there are these reports, as you mentioned, that Vladimir Putin will be called to the mediation table. But do you think that that would happen?
Well, God knows. I mean, anything could happen. I mean, I never thought that the United States would vote with Iran, North Korea, and Russia against resolutions at the United Nations, and that happened. So anything could happen. And in a certain way, to the extent that Trump is trying to find a ramp to bring Putin back into the mainstream, this is certainly one way of doing it. And so Trump and Putin may be cooking this up as a way of restoring relations. Who knows what's going to happen? The one thing I can say for sure is that Putin has no ability to broker any kind of deal of any sort with Iran. Iran has their interests. Israel has their interests. America has its interests. But Putin can't, there's nothing Putin can do in this scenario other than use it in the same way as he uses this whole peace negotiation carrot, where he has no intention of negotiating, to prolong the war and kick everything into the future. And this adds one more element to that. But I don't believe that there's anything Putin can do to broker a peace between Israel and Iran. There's nothing that Putin can do to tell the Iranians to not pursue their development of nuclear weapons. They've wanted to do that, and they intend to do that, and that has nothing to do with Putin.
But do you think that Putin and the Russian army are reliant on Iran's drones and missiles that they give to Russia, so much so that this war will affect their own military capabilities?
Well, I think that Russia has had a lot of time to take the technology and details of the drones that the Iranians have been producing and start producing them internally in Russia. I understand that they can produce quite a few drones in Russia using the technology from the Iranians. And so I think that if this had happened 2 years ago, it'd be different than it is today. And I think that if Iran were not to exist anymore as a ally of Russia, Russia would still be able to reap havoc on Ukraine the way they have been in the last few months.
Bill, on May 29th, Donald Trump was asked by a reporter whether he thought Putin wanted peace. And he said, "I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, we're going to find out whether or not Putin is tapping us along or not. And if he is, we will respond differently." So it's obviously been over 2 weeks. We're in 10 days or over that will be a month after that day. Since May 29th, Russia has launched around 7 major aerial attacks on Ukraine. That has included around 500 drone and missile attacks in a 2-day period. I think there was 20 deaths in Kyiv in the last day or so after a Russian attack. So 2 weeks is up. At what point does Donald Trump live up to this promise of responding differently to Putin?
Well, in my opinion, at no point. I think that Donald Trump has no intention of responding in any significant way to Putin. And he's hoping that we'll forget about all that stuff because we're all focusing on Iran or whatever the next, or LA riots or whatever. He wants to just keep on distracting us because he has no intention of holding Putin to account. I think we should understand that and be clear-eyed about that.
And this should surely be the most prime example of this TACO acronym, Bill, this Trump always chickens out acronym that Financial Times, I think, a reporter coined, where basically he'll make the threats, he'll make the calls, but he won't follow through.
Well, I don't think there was any real threat here. I think that Trump has from the very beginning apologized for Putin, said, I probably would have done the same thing, and it's our fault that NATO expansion that Russia went in. It's our fault that we kicked the Russians out of the G8 that Putin went in. It's our fault here or there. He's busy parroting Putin's lines, and so there's no. This is not a taco situation because he never talked tough properly about Putin. He's every once in a while he said, I think he's crazy for doing this, or he should really not be doing this, or but I think that was just purely to placate the Lindsey Grahams of the world who are on his side and most other things, but supports Ukraine and opposes Putin.
Well, I think let's get into this Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal sanctions bill that they have put forward a while ago, maybe a few months ago now. But basically on Sunday, these two bipartisan leaders, Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal, they went on CBS's Face the Nation, where they continued to publicly urge President Trump to push for their bipartisan sanction and tariff bill, which would basically target Russian energy and in turn cripple the economy. So right now, 84 out of 107 senators are supporting this bill. They told CBS, I think the president should call on the Senate to vote approval of the Russian sanctions bill literally tomorrow. So this is on Sunday, and he said he's on his way, Trump is on his way tonight to the G7 meeting. He will be sitting across from world leaders. Right now, very bluntly, the perception may be one of weakness in terms of America's position on Ukraine. He can be there in a position of strength. Now, of course, we saw him leave the G7 early, and this discussion of the bill was not brought to the attention of these other world leaders. But what do you think the hold is up here, Bill? Because you've got one of Donald Trump's staunchest supporters, Lindsey Graham, literally going on a national television show urging his own boss to support this bill.
Well, I know a lot about how this process works because I spent a number of years getting a law passed in the U.S. called the Magnitsky Act, and I worked with senators and members of the House of Representatives from both sides. In the United States Constitution, there's the executive branch, which is the president, and then there's the legislative branch, which is the U.S. Congress, Senate, and House of Representatives. And based on the Constitution, they're co-equal branches of government. And so the Senate could, at any point, put the piece of legislation, the Lindsey Graham, Richard Blumenthal bill in, vote on it. They already have 84 co-sponsors, so it would probably pass at least 84 to 16, if not 100 to 0. And then they'd present it for the president to sign. And the president couldn't not sign it. He can't veto the bill if he doesn't have, if it's veto proof. It's got more than 75% voting in favor of it. Therefore, they should just do it. Now, the reason it's being held up is because he's making phone calls and he's telling Republicans who control the Senate and control the Senate Foreign Relations Committee where this bill sits, not to progress it. And so it's not progressing. And so they could, if they wanted to, push this bill through and they could cripple Putin, but they haven't yet. And so we'll see. I've been there before with a lot of different circumstances and in fact, totally different circumstances in which when the Magnitsky Act was going through, President Obama was trying to pursue a reset with Russia, and he's trying to convince the Senate not to vote on it on the Magnitsky Act, which would have upset Putin. And eventually, it happened anyways, and he grudgingly signed the law. And so it's possible, and if they really wanted to do this, we'll see.
Yeah, that's interesting, Bill, because it's interesting that you can override it. You don't have to wait for President Trump to veto it. But I just think it's a telling sign when you've got Lindsey Graham, a member of the Republican Party, going on programs publicly urging for him to bring this bill into motion. So I wonder, does it show that there's probably a little bit of division going on in the Republican Party over how best to handle Putin?
Well, I think there's a division within the Republican Party on how best to handle Trump. on one hand, I think that everybody that I know in the Republican Party, with a few minor exceptions, are in favor of Ukraine and against Putin and would do whatever needs to be done and to help Ukraine. And they're all trying to figure out how they can do that in a way that doesn't sort of create a direct conflict with Trump, where they could then end up having their careers ruined or whatever it is they're worried about Trump doing because he's really so firmly in Putin's camp.
Well, I just hope in the next week or so that this actually gets through. And we've seen them say that this should be passed ASAP, that there's so much urgency towards it. And I don't know why you wouldn't do it. They've even called upon China to even stop buying Russian oil themselves. So we'll wait and watch and see if that has any developments. So Bill Browder, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thank you. Thank you.